Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me in today's webinar. We're focusing on neck and shoulders, so it's definitely going to be an information-packed class in the sense that we're going to start by talking about a little anatomy and some muscle structures that really influence that area of the shoulders and neck. And then today's class is really going to be specifically geared towards first releasing any tension in the neck or anything happening in the spine that might be causing tension, and laying down with some restorative poses. And then we're going to start working a little bit more with the shoulders. As you see in the 3D models that I'm going to show, the shoulders definitely affect our neck and our neck muscles. If there's any sort of tightness, you're probably going to notice it in your shoulders or upper back as well. So we're going to dive into some things that loosen the shoulders up, and then we're going to end class with a little bit more support for the neck and the shoulders. Overall, I hope that you walk away with some tips and tricks to maybe release some immediate neck tension, but ultimately picking something that you could integrate into your day-to-day life. And so then you can really reap those benefits of a long-term practice of caring for your neck and your shoulders. So I want to start by sharing my screen here. You should be able to see some muscles. And here we have a little bit of a front view of the neck. See a lot of intricate muscles laying through there. You have this larger pectoral muscle. Oops. You have a larger pectoral muscle here across the front of the chest, a deltoid that kind of caps around that top of the shoulder. And then as we look at the back of the body, you can see this large diamond shaped muscle. This is a pretty important muscle to be attentive about, especially if you're dealing with any neck or upper back tension. You can see with the trapezius muscle that it connects as low as near the base of the rib cage on your back. And as I talk about this, I would encourage you to almost feel around your back in these areas, feel your shoulders, start to bring some touch to your body so you can build a sense of where they are located. So as you can see, it kind of goes down to the base near the base of the rib cage, and then it comes up, spans across to the top of the shoulder, and then the very top of that diamond shaped muscle actually inserts right up near the base of the skull. Now, if you were to feel in this area, really at the top of the neck, base of the skull, there's usually an indentation there. This is called the occiput. And so that's a pretty pivotal place to be aware of. Sometimes neck tension can really spawn from that area, but it's also where our spine starts to connect to our skull. And then you have a lot of these neck muscles coming in together and located at that point as well. So the trapezius muscle is something we definitely want to be attentive about, and we will be working with today. There's a bunch of other muscles kind of underlying underneath there that help support the neck and hold the neck up as we walk through day-to-day life. But this muscle really becomes important to understand where the neck and the shoulders come together. This is where they really do have a pretty in-depth relationship with one another. So when we want neck health or we want to relieve pain in our neck, we have to have a conversation and a little bit of a practice with the shoulders as well. And vice versa. If you're having some tension in your shoulders, we want to bring some awareness to what's happening in the neck. So I just wanted to show this to you so you have a visual in your mind. Now I want to switch to this model so so you can see what's going on down underneath all of those muscular layers. So starting with the back of the body, you can see this is the thoracic spine, or the spine that's along the inside of the rib cage is the thoracic spine. Above that, you have the cervical spine. Now, if you were to go below that thoracic spine, you have your lumbar. The lumbar spine and the cervical spine are a little bit more mobile, and you can move it a little bit easier than the thoracic spine. Today's practice is really going to be trying to get that thoracic spine to work and open up so that your cervical spine, or the spine in your neck, doesn't have to work as much. if you were in my Yoga for Hips webinar, then we talked a little bit more about what's kind of going on in the lumbar spine and the pelvis and that relationship. But now in this webinar, we're moving into that upper body area. You can see that we have not only our humerus bone or that upper arm bone that we're pretty familiar with, but if we were to look at this connection and where it's actually attaching, it's pretty fascinating dynamic that we can see. So not only do we have the rib cage, but we have our collarbone. So that's this top bone that's spanning across and out to the edge of the shoulder. And you can, again, feel that on yourself. Usually our collarbones kind of protrude slightly at the base of the neck and right above the very center of the chest. That center of the chest plate is called your sternum. And so we will use that in class today, and I will reference that. And then as you move to the back here, we have our shoulder blades or scapula. You can see how these also come around to that kind of point or cap of the shoulder. The muscle above that is called the deltoid, but underneath that you can kind of see how there's this merging of a couple of different bones. The shoulder joint is fairly complex. It is the joint in our body that we have the most range of motion. So it's really important for us to care about that area and specifically care about that joint. The thing that I think that is the coolest about all of this is that our scapula and our shoulder blades actually move across the top of the rib cage. So they're not really stuck in place. Instead, they move. So you can feel this if you were to roll your shoulders forward. You might feel your chest get a little bit more, collapsed. But then pull your shoulders back to the wall behind you and try and lift your sternum up towards the ceiling. And I'll do this a couple of times, taking the shoulders forward and taking the shoulders back. So now you get to feel and experience those scapula moving across the back of the rib cage. They'll spread apart from each other as the shoulders come forward, and then they squeeze together as you bring the shoulders back. Now, that trapezius muscle is absolutely a big part of this. You also have a rhomboid muscle that's attaching these shoulder blades underneath the trapezius, which really helps. There's this nice stretch in the pectoral muscle. And so you can really start to identify and feel all of those different muscles coming together to create this movement for you. Now, if you're doing this and you're already feeling maybe the trapezius is quite tense already, and we haven't even been doing too much, but it's naturally in that state. Maybe you're feeling the sides of the neck are a little bit tense, or maybe you're feeling some soreness in the fronts of the shoulders. These are all things to become attentive about, especially if you have consistent or chronic neck pain that you're facing in your day-to-day life. So I hope that these visuals help at least establish kind of a baseline language and understanding of what we're going to practice today. I'm just going to scroll through this muscle system again one more time before we get started here. All those intricate neck muscles. And I'll include some links to access these so that if you want to play around with them yourself, you can go ahead and do that. So today, as we move into a little bit of a physical practice now, we are going to start by laying down and really using some blankets, some rolled blankets. As we move forward in class, the props that you're going to need are a strap and something to sit on. So I have a block that I'll eventually be sitting on in hero's pose or virasana. But if that's something that's uncomfortable for your legs or your hips, then you can sit in whichever pose is most comfortable for you, even if that means sitting in a chair. We also will come to a point towards the end of class where we are using quite a bit of blankets. So if you have a bolster nearby, that might help give you the support that you need for the practice without using 5 to 6 blankets. If you are just using blankets or towels or maybe even stacking sheets today, you'll probably need 4 to 5 stacks of those. Now, I'm going to integrate a little bit of this knowledge as we move forward, and I'll give you some tips as we move along. But I just want to start by premising that if you do have regular neck pain and regular neck tension, we really want to start with a low amount of support when we lie down. An example is we're going to put a rolled blanket underneath the neck. That roll can be very thin. It doesn't have to be super thick. But what I would encourage you to do is have a lot of discernment as we move forward. It's okay to feel a sense of stretching or, maybe even some slight tension, like the muscles want to hold on and you're challenging them to let go. That's okay. But if you feel any strain to the point where you might not be able to lift your head, or you're losing some of that ability to actually hold yourself and hold your head with your neck, then that's where we want to integrate some discernment. And I'll premise, which way to go, whether it's adding more support or less support as we move forward. But just be aware of that. Any pain, anything like that, be super mindful of. Just in general, I'm going to turn to my side so you can kind of see what's going on with my neck. I had someone ask a great question about neck rolls, which we'll practice today. And I mentioned, we really only want to keep the head and neck going forward. And they said, well, why don't you drop your head back? And if you're feeling neck pain, it's probably not a good idea to compress the neck in this way. And you can even see that there's quite a sharp bend happening in the neck here. And that's not going to be great if you have neck pain. That could contribute to it a little bit more. So anytime we move into back bends, it really comes from the shoulders. And if we're leaning the head back to any level, it takes a lot of strength in the neck to actually hold it up, as opposed to just dropping back. And you can even hear it in the tone of my voice, right? So we really are going to be practicing and learning today. How do we get that extension without it really starting to crink in the neck and the cervical spine? So that's just kind of a premise in the beginning of class. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt and pop in. This can be a dialogue if you're doing the live stream with me. Otherwise, I'm going to try and cover as much detail as possible without distracting from the practice. So blankets, bolster, strap, something to sit on, whether it's more blankets, block, or even a chair. That's what you're going to need today. For this first setup, we're going to take one of our blankets and we're going to open it up, depending on how you have it folded at your house. We're going to open it up once from what I like to call shelf fold. So shelf fold tends to look a little something like this. You might have it different at your house depending on how you're storing it. But we want to open it up once from there, and it kind of looks a little bit longer. And then we want to roll the long edge. Now, I had mentioned that we're going to be pretty mindful of the support that we put underneath our neck. So if you feel pretty comfortable in the neck today, or maybe you've even practiced putting a rolled blanket underneath your head before, then rolling it, about halfway is probably going to be sufficient. If your neck is quite tense, or maybe even is tender to the touch, you won't really need to roll it that much. You might just roll it a little bit on that long edge and then have the rest supporting the back of your head. So you can always start with a smaller roll, and once you come to lay down, maybe increase that roll underneath you. So we'll start by putting this at the head of our mat, since we are going to lay down flat on our backs. As you come to lay down, just start with the feet flat on the floor, the knees are bent, and then we're coming down to our elbows, spreading the elbows, and then laying back on our rolled blanket. You can feel where that rolled blanket is. Sometimes it ends up underneath our shoulders. For today, we really want it to just be underneath that cervical spine or that neck vertebrae, that neck portion of the spine. So once you come down, you can shift that roll as you need to, maybe even roll it up a little bit more depending on how comfortable your neck is feeling. But what this is doing is bringing a little bit more skeletal alignment to the bones in the neck. Interestingly enough, the natural shape of our neck is as it's falling on the rolled blanket, meaning that it's curving slightly up towards the ceiling as we're laying down in this position. It's not good for the neck to bow backwards, and then sometimes people lose that curvature in their neck, and it can be a source of a lot of discomfort as well. So as we get started here, we're really just allowing the neck and that cervical spine to rest in a little bit more of a neutral position. You should feel that your shoulders are free from support. The shoulders are just resting on the floor. That rolled blanket is in the back of the neck. And the base of the skull, that occiput that we had talked about earlier, is actually just kind of resting on that edge of the roll. But ultimately, the back of the head is almost hanging back or resting backwards on the residual blanket, or maybe even on the floor, depending on how much of a support you have underneath the neck. You take a few breaths here, just feel your upper body settling into the floor. If you have any tension in your low back, or it becomes uncomfortable to straighten the legs, then you can go ahead and keep them bent. Otherwise, feel free to stretch the legs out, stretch the arms out, just feeling your body settling into the floor with every inhale and every exhale. As you gently lengthen your breath, notice if there's any tension that's holding on. Start to visualize the areas in your body that we looked at in the 3D models. You can start really thinking about the neck and the back of the neck, since that's where we have a little more sensation right now. Thinking about where that trapezius muscle spans, that diamond shaped muscle connecting at the base of the skull. And as it comes down and across the tops of the shoulders, really out to the cap of the shoulder. And then it comes in and down near the base of the rib cage on the back of the body. Think about how that upper arm bone or that humerus bone connects with that scapula on the back of the body, so our shoulder blade, but also remembering that the collarbone intersects in that same area at the cap of the shoulder. Collarbones moving in towards the sternum or the very center of the chest. And then feel how that whole area has the support of the pectoral muscles. Notice if there's any tension in that area. With every inhale and every exhale, try to soften and let go, feeling your body settle into the floor, feeling your neck settle into the blanket. And then to come up, we're going to slowly bend the knees. You can bring your right hand underneath your head. As you roll to your right side, you're kind of supporting your head with your hand. And to come up, bringing the opposite hand to the floor, and you'll pull yourself up to sit. Now we're going to take that same rolled blanket and we're going to place it along the spine. So if you tend to feel like your head is quite heavy or it's difficult to support it, we're going to add another blanket to place underneath the head at the top of that rolled blanket. It's not totally necessary if you feel comfortable without it, or maybe you're not feeling that much tension in the neck today. But if you felt like when you were coming out of that last pose, if you felt that the head was quite heavy and difficult to hold up, then I would recommend having that extra blanket for support. We're going to come back into that laying down position, this time with the rolled blanket along our spine. Now we really want the base of that rolled blanket to come to the base of the rib cage. So if you want, you can watch for a moment and I'll kind of demonstrate where we're going to want that placed. Or if you're familiar with this, you feel like you have enough information, you're welcome to come along in with me. So I'm starting with my feet flat on the floor, knees bent. My arms are back behind me. I'm going to slowly lower myself down. Now I can already feel where that blanket is hitting in my back. I want that end of the rolled blanket to be closer towards the base of my rib cage rather than being close to my hips. And then I can adjust it either from side to side, or I can shift it up or down my spine, depending on what I need to get that alignment. And as you start to lay down, you can spread the elbows, place the hands on the abdomen. So this is where we'll start. If you feel that the head is really kinking back, really that the chin is lifted higher than the nose when you come to lay back, this is where it would be helpful to have something underneath the head. Not only helpful, but just overall more comfortable. If you feel that you can lengthen the back of the neck and that it's not tender or difficult to adjust your head with the neck muscles, then you might not need it. So have that discretion. As you come to lay down yourself, if you haven't already, just feeling where that rolled blanket is along the spine. It should feel like it's closer to the base of the rib cage. Notice if it's pulling left or right a little bit more, and take the time to make that adjustment so that it really is supporting the spine specifically. We're just taking a few breaths here with the knees bent, feet flat on the floor. This can be helpful to keep the hips in a neutral position. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you can straighten the legs, stretch the arms out to the sides. Just take a few breaths here, allowing your body to melt over that rolled blanket. It almost feels as if the shoulders are draping off to the sides towards the floor. As you take a smooth, steady inhale and a smooth, steady exhale, try to let go of any tension in your face, eyes, lips, or jaw. And observe where your breath flows. Sometimes as we breathe, you might feel it more in the abdomen or the belly. During these next few breaths, see if you can inhale a little bit higher into the chest. So as you inhale, try to fill the upper outer corners of the chest, almost as if to breathe into the base of the collarbones. You'll feel your rib cage expand and contract. On your next inhale, try to breathe into and fill the sides of the rib cage. And then to come up, we'll slowly bend the knees. You can bring your right hand underneath your head as you roll to your side. Have your hand there to support your head as you come off that rolled blanket. And then you'll slowly press yourself up to sit. When coming up to sit, it's helpful to almost turn towards the floor and use your hands to come up. Then you don't feel as much pressure on the neck, pulling the head back or pulling the head off to the sides. Now, this next pose is where it might be helpful to have a bolster. We're going to take that rolled blanket and we're going to turn it just so that it's in a similar position to when we placed it underneath our neck. And we're going to grab either another couple of blankets and place it right above that. Where we're going to have these props placed in our body is we want that rolled blanket to be in our upper back across the shoulder blades. And so often the area that we have a little bit more sensitivity in is right here. We kind of might hear it be called the kidney band. It's a little bit closer to the base of the rib cage. But ultimately, our shoulder blades are a little bit higher. And when I started practicing by placing things a little bit higher, it really started to change my awareness in my upper back and ultimately my practice with my neck. And so we really want that support to come down to the base of the armpits and across the upper back. So that's where that rolled blanket is going to be placed. Then we have a bolster or another stack of blankets, which is going to be supporting our head. There's a little space between these props, and that's where our shoulders are going to fall. We're going to take the arms out to the sides, so make sure you have enough room around you to do this. We want the support underneath our head to be either the same height or a little bit taller than the support that we have in our upper back. So again, you're going to want that support underneath the head to be either the same height or a little bit higher than that support going across the upper back. So I have a bolster with a folded blanket on top of that for underneath the neck. And then I have a rolled blanket. I've rolled it completely. You do not have to. So be discerning on your practice and we'll give this one a try. I'll demonstrate coming into this first and then we'll come in together. So coming into this one, we can actually bring our elbows down to that rolled blanket. And then I want my shoulder to be directly above my elbows. Rather than kind of just slouching like we're hanging out on the beach, we want to press the elbows down and lift the sternum up. You should feel that there's a little bit of activity to get the chest lifting away from the shoulders. And we can spread the elbows out to the sides, and you'll feel that rolled blanket come right up close to the base of the armpit. From here, I'm just going to press into my feet just slightly, and I'm just slightly shifting myself off that rolled blanket. And that kind of creates a little bit more of a curvature in the shoulder, helps create a little bit more of that back bend sensation. Then I'm going to pull the support underneath my head so that it's tight against the tops of the shoulders. Arms are out to the sides, and you can keep the knees bent or straighten the legs, depending on what's most comfortable for your body. So if you haven't joined me yet, then you can go ahead and join me now. Start with the elbows on the rolled blanket, feet flat on the floor, knees bent. You press the elbows down, lift the chest up, and then just spread the elbows out to the sides. As you lay down, you'll feel that rolled blanket come quite close to the base of the armpit. And as you press into your feet, just slightly shift your shoulders off that rolled blanket. You should feel the base of the shoulder blades start to lift into the body, lift up towards the ceiling with that pressure of the rolled blanket. From here, you'll just adjust the support underneath your head and your neck, making sure that those props are pulled in tight to the tops of the shoulders. Now, I want you to bring your hands and place them underneath your skull, and you'll use your thumbs to pull into and touch that base of the skull or that occiput. And so you might feel that these muscles here in the neck are even slightly tender to the touch. But as you find where that occiput is, feeling where that trapezius muscle and those neck muscles are connecting to the base of the skull, go ahead and give that area just a little massage with your thumbs. Notice if there's any spot that's a little bit more sensational than others. As you take a nice deep exhale, you're going to use your thumbs to kind of hook into that base of the occiput and then gently pull. And so as you pull and you extend the back of the neck, soften the throat, you'll feel your chin come a little bit closer to the chest or to the neck, but it's really that back of the neck that's extending and lengthening. You can do this as long as you would like. Well, once you're done, you'll slowly pull your hands out towards the top of the head and see if you can soften the muscles in the throat and the neck so that you can maintain that length in the back of the skull, in the back of the neck that you just created. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, you're welcome to straighten the legs. Feel your body settling into the props, settling into the floor. Notice if there's any tension in your face, letting go of any gripping across the forehead or in the eyes, softening any tension in the lips or the jaw. And then we'll move slowly to come out, starting to bend the knees with the feet flat on the floor. You can bring your right hand underneath your head, roll to your right side with your head supported, and then turning towards the floor to press yourself up to sit. So these are great poses and things to practice either before you get your day started or maybe even at the end of a longer day. Now we're going to clear our mats off and we're actually going to come to a comfortable seated posture. So if you are comfortable sitting with the legs crossed, that's great. I'd recommend sitting on some support. If you feel like the best support for you is even sitting in a chair, then I would encourage you to do that. We would like the chair to be a little bit more firm as opposed to sitting on the couch or something like that. And we're also going to need some range of motion for our arms. So you want to make sure that you can move your arms around wherever you're sitting. I'm personally going to sit in a pose called Virasana or Hero's Pose. I'm choosing this pose just because it's easier to keep the pelvis in a more neutral position. Now, if you've never practiced this before, or you have significant tension in the ankles or tension in the knees, then this is a pose you might need a little extra support in. So I'm going to share my practice with you. If it's a little bit too much, to take in and manage, then just use another seated posture. I'm going to start by grabbing my block, having that nearby. And then I'm going to unfold a blanket or unroll that blanket that we were just using. I want this blanket to support the shins, and then I'll be sitting on the block. Ultimately, we're going to have the feet hanging off this back edge of the fold of the blanket. So it's just the shin bone, just the front of the ankle that's supported on this open blanket here. Now we also want to have a strap nearby. So when we come into that seated posture, it should be within an arm's reach. I'm going to place the block off of that blanket. And I'm going to come to a kneeling posture. Here, the knees are completely together and the feet are a little bit wider than the hips. So if I were to come back and sit down, I'd actually be sitting between my ankles. You can grab the calf muscle out from the back of the knee and then come to sit down on the block here. Again, you should have about a hand's distance between the heels and the hips if you're sitting in Virasana today. Can go down and adjust the feet so that the middle toe is in line with the very center of your heel. Again, this is a pose that can cause a little tension in the ankles, a little tension in the knees. You can add more support underneath the shins, or you can add more support underneath the hips to help with this. If it just seems like it's too much and you haven't practiced this before, or it's too sensational in the knees or the ankles, then I would recommend moving into something else, since today's focus really is the neck and the shoulders. You take a few breaths in whichever seated posture you're in. Just notice what's happening in the shoulders. What is their natural position and tendencies? Often when we're at the computer quite a bit during the day, you might even feel that your chest is heavy towards the floor, that you're slouching almost. As you take a nice deep inhale, really try and lift the very center of your sternum up towards the ceiling. Now you're gonna see me touch these areas of my body, and I'd recommend that you do the same for yourself. Is bringing some touch can help build a little more sensation into these areas that might feel a little bit gray or unknown. So feeling where that sternum bone is, taking a nice deep inhale, with every inhale, trying to bring a nice lift into that space. As we've already gotten started, you might feel that there's a little bit more tension in the neck. Notice if the chin has a tendency to lift or if you have a tendency to tuck the chin in. Instead, see if you can float the chin just parallel to the floor. With the chest lifting, really the chin just floating, soften any tension in the eyes, face, or jaw. And we're going to start class today just by pulling the shoulders forward and back, forward and back. We did this when we were looking at that 3D model. As you're doing this, notice as the shoulders come forward, the front of the chest is contracting, the back of the body, or that trapezius muscle, is expanding. Then as we pull the shoulders back, now that trapezius muscle is contracting and the pectorals and the chest muscle is expanding. Just 2 more times. Shoulders forward, shoulders back, shoulders forward, and shoulders back. Now we're going to bring our hands to the caps of the shoulder, and we're going to move our elbows a little bit. And so as you lift your elbows up and down, really notice what's happening in the shoulders. One might operate differently than the other. That's okay. We're really just taking notes right now. Now we're going to bring our elbows together and we're in front of us, and then we're going to take them back to the wall behind us. Elbows forward and elbows back. 2 more times. Elbows forward and elbows back. Elbows forward and elbows back. Now, as you bring your elbows forward, we're going to create some circles. So you can start by taking the elbows down, out, back, and up. And as they come forward, they're coming down a little bit to the front of the chest. So do that 3 more times, making these large circles with our elbows, starting by meeting them in the middle, down, out, and back. As they come up, they start to move forward and back to that start position, the chest, in front of the chest. 1 more time, large circle with the elbows and back. Now we're going to start by taking the elbows up and out, back, down, and forward. So 4 total. Now we're doing circles the opposite direction than what we started with. Doesn't have to be fast. Ultimately, we want to feel what's happening in the shoulders, where there might be some tension or stiffness. Now elbows are back in center. Now we're going to do opposite. This is a little bit more of a brain game. So the elbows are splitting in opposite directions now. Out and around and forward, and then they cross. Out and around and forward. Now we're going to do the opposite direction. So whichever elbow went down last is going to lift up and out and around. 1 more, up, out, and around. And back to center. And then you can rest your hands on your lap. Taking a nice, smooth, steady inhale and exhale. Feeling your elbows weigh heavy towards the floor. As you keep the very center of your chest lifting, just allow the shoulders to relax. Soften any tension in the face or the eyes. Now we're going to grab our strap. And you can unroll it or unfold it. In this next practice, you kind of want a long strap for it. And depending on what kind of tension you have in your shoulders, might adjust what length of strap you will need. I have a nice long one to demonstrate here. So I'm going to turn to my side so that you can see what I'm going to do a little bit better. So we're going to start by pulling the strap nice and taut, and the arms are straight this whole time. I'm going to bring the arms forward, and then I'm lifting them up and back and around. Now there's going to come a point when you either feel like you can't go back anymore or you want to bend your elbows. Instead, keep the arms straight and just slide the hands out away from each other a little bit more. We're going to bring the hands all the way down back behind us so the arms stay straight the entire time. Again, we'll start with the arms forward, lifting them up and back and around. Now, if you have anything in particular going on with your shoulders, such as just recently having an operation within the past few months, or maybe you've had frozen shoulder in the past, it might not be beneficial to go all the way. And that's where you're just going to practice going to your maximum, getting a nice stretch, but don't overdo it. Some of you guys will feel a little bit of tension, but have that ability to go all the way back and around. Remember, we can always slide the hands away from each other a little bit more to access that mobility. So we're gonna go ahead and practice this together now. You're gonna go ahead and pull the strap nice and taut in front of you, arms are straight. We'll start with the hands low, and you're gonna lift the arms up and back behind you. Notice if those elbows want to bend, and instead you can just slide your hands down the strap away from each other a little bit more. And then we'll bring the arms back up and over. We're gonna do this 3 more times, feeling what's happening in the shoulders. Notice if any shoulder is different than the other. Again, you don't have to do this fast. We really want to bring some mindfulness into what our body is doing to accomplish this movement. We'll come back forward and then just do one more here. Lifting the sternum up, face is soft, eyes are soft, hands back behind us, and then coming forward. Then you can just place the strap on the floor, rest your hands on your thighs, let the elbows hang. So there is a slight lift of the spine. You can almost imagine as if you're being pulled from the very crown of your head. And the crown of your head is where the top of your head meets the back of your head. And so there's almost this slight rounding, right? It's where a lot of women might hold their ponytail, but finding where that crown of the head is, and imagine as if you're being pulled up through that area with a string. Crown of the head lifting and lengthening so the spine remains nice and long, sitting nice and tall, letting the elbows and arms and shoulder joint rest as you sit up straight. Very nice. Now, if you've been sitting with your legs crossed, you can switch the cross of the legs. We're going to still practice one more thing here in our seated pose, whichever that might be for you. We're going to practice rolling our head from side to side. But as we practice this today, we're going to place the hands in a little bit of a different position than you might be used to. We're going to place the hands back behind our hips. And so what we'll do is we'll actually hold on to one of our wrists back behind us here. It's quite low on the spine, really the back of the pelvis. But we're going to pay attention and notice, are the shoulders drooping or draping forward, or can we lift and pull the shoulders back? And so that's going to be the position of the arms as we practice rolling our head from left to right. I'm going to demonstrate really briefly, and then we can practice together. So as I hold my hands behind me, I'm lifting the elbows back, rolling the shoulders back. I'm going to start by taking the chin forward and down towards the chest. Then as I roll my head off to the side, now my right ear is above my shoulder and my gaze is forward. Then I'm going to roll the head forward through the center and off the left side, left ear over the left shoulder. Notice if those shoulders like to tense and lift up towards the ears, or if the chest even drops, maybe you lose that length of the spine. Just pay attention to all of those variables. Then we'll bring our chin back to center. We'll do each side a few more times. And then to come up, we're going to have our chin in line with the chest and lift the head back into that neutral position. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. But I hope that that's descriptive enough for you to work with. So we'll start by holding the hands behind us, really just holding on to one of the wrists near the pelvis. Elbows are bent, and you'll reach the elbows to the wall behind you. Shoulders roll back. Take your chin forward and down towards the chest. We'll start by rolling the head over the right shoulder, coming forward and over to the left shoulder. As you come back to center, we'll practice this again, but you can move at your own pace. So if you feel like you need to hold at one side for a little bit, really taking in that stretch across the top of the shoulder and the side of the neck, feel free to do so. Just taking the time to roll the chin forward towards the center as you transition to the opposite side. Keeping the sternum lifting, elbows and shoulders are rolling back. Smooth, steady inhales and exhales as you roll your head from left to right. We'll do each side one more time. And whenever you're finished, bring your chin down to the chest and then slowly lift it back up to that neutral position. This is almost something that I do every day just to get that nice stretch across the side of the neck and the tops of the shoulders. Now, for our next few poses, we're going to come up to standing. So you can set your props aside, have your strap nearby. We're going to practice. I'm going to shift my mat around so it's a little easier for you guys to see me. We're just going to start standing in Tadasana or mountain pose. In mountain pose, the feet are together. You'll feel the big toe ball mounts, the center of the heels touching. And then for today, we're going to take the feet about hip width apart. So you can point your toes off to the side, then lift your heels and shift the heels out. It's almost like you're doing a little bit of a plie like a ballerina would as you come to that position. This is about hip width apart, and you can make those adjustments and kind of finesse that space between the feet. But ultimately, this is going to help us get a nice tall standing posture. The toes are turned in slightly. So we have the middle toe lining up with the very center of the heel. As you stand up nice and tall, take a few breaths here and grab your strap. We're going to practice one of the poses that we practiced earlier. So taking the arms up and overhead and back behind us. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see a little bit better. Feet are hip width apart. We're holding the strap nice and taut with the arms straight. We're going to reach the arms up and overhead and back behind us. And then coming forward. Nice deep inhale and exhale. You can move slow to feel the shoulders working symmetrically. So notice if one shoulder wants to work more than the other, or if one shoulder is a little more tender than the other as you do this. Just become attentive to that. Do this 2 more times. Eventually, when you feel you're ready, you can even start bringing the hands a little bit closer together, challenging that mobility in the shoulders. As you take a nice deep exhale, draw the belly in and tuck your tailbone down to the floor. We're going to pause for a moment with the arms straight up and overhead. Notice what's happening in your spine here. Notice if the low back is rounding slightly or if the abdomen and the belly is poofing forward. As you take a nice deep exhale, see if you can tuck your tailbone down towards your heels and stand up nice and tall. I feel a little bit more straight, a little bit more length in the spine. And then bringing the arms forward, and one more time. Arms up and back behind us, keeping that tuck of the tailbone. And then reaching the arms back and forward. And then you can just let the arms hang for a moment. You can even give them a little gentle shake if there's any tension or tightness that's holding on in the shoulder joint. Now, this next pose that we're going to practice is called Gomukhasana or cow face pose. You can go ahead and take your strap and place it over your left shoulder. I'm going to turn around and just demonstrate what this pose looks like. And we kind of practiced part of it earlier when we held on to our wrist behind our back. The left hand is going to come in and be placed like that. However, my right hand is going to lift up and I'm going to bend my elbow and bring it to the base of my neck here. Now, I have a strap nearby, so I can just hold on to the strap. Our goal isn't necessarily to grasp the hands together. Eventually, that might happen. However, our main goal is to become a little bit more aware of what's happening in those shoulder blades. Noticing if the spine is tilting in any way, noticing if that shoulder that's lifted is squeezing towards the ear, and instead trying to bring those shoulder blades back to a little bit more of a neutral position, even when the arms are doing opposite things. So Gomukhasana, and then to come out, I'm going to release the strap, straighten the arms, and come back to center. When we go to switch sides, we'll just place the strap on the opposite shoulder here, and then we'll again bring that hand down back behind us, reaching the opposite one up and overhead near the base of, and then bending the elbow to bring the palm to the base of the neck. Gomukhasana, cow face pose. So I'm going to stay with my back turned so that you can kind of see this process and we can practice this process together. So we'll start with that strap over the right shoulder. You can bring your right hand down below, back along the back of the pelvis here. You can hold on to the strap. Before we go any farther, try to press the back of your palm into your pelvis. Lift the elbow back behind you and lengthen the shoulder away from the ear. So there is this action of actually pulling the shoulder away from the ear here. You can stretch the elbow back and down towards the floor to help encourage this. Then you'll reach your left arm up and overhead, bend the elbow, and you'll feel your hand come towards the base of the neck, and you can hold on to that strap. So you take a few breaths here. Notice what's happening in the shoulders. Draw that left shoulder down the spine so that there's a lot of space between the left shoulder and the left ear. Taking a nice deep steady inhale and exhale. Tuck your tailbone down to the heels as you lift your sternum up towards the ceiling. If you feel comfortable doing so, you can slowly bring your hands a little bit closer to each other. But we really want to put put an effort into pulling the shoulders away from the ears and keeping the shoulders squeezing in towards the spine. If you start to notice that the shoulders are quite dramatically shifted, then keep that space between the palms. It'll be a little bit easier to access some motion and space when the hands aren't so close to one another. And then to come out, we'll straighten the arms and bring the hands down along our sides. We're back in Tadasana or mountain pose now. We'll switch to the other side, so you can take your strap over the left shoulder, bringing that left hand back behind you. As you press the back of the palm against your pelvis, try to lift your elbow to the wall behind you, but also stretch your elbow down to the floor. Notice how that starts to pull the shoulder not only away from the ear, but also down the spine. And you'll reach your right arm up and overhead, bend the elbow, and bring your hand to the base of the neck. You can hold on to the strap. And as you take a few breaths here, squeeze the shoulder blades together and try and pull that right shoulder away from the ear. Gomukhasana, cow face pose. Now, if you can keep that structure in your shoulder blades, you can slowly bring the hands together, but really put a priority on keeping the structure in the shoulders. That Closeness of the hands will come with practice, but ultimately we want the shoulders to be in a little bit more of a neutral position, even though the arms might be doing opposite things or different things. And then we'll straighten the arms, bringing the hands back down along the sides, taking a breath here. Smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. We'll do each arm one more time. We won't hold it as long, but just to get a sense of the practice. So with the strap over your right shoulder, bring the right hand behind you. Reach the left arm up and overhead. And as you bend the elbow, the hand will come to the base of the neck and you can go ahead and grab the strap. So gently pull on the strap, pulling the hands away from one another. Stretch the elbows into opposite directions. Left elbow lifting up, right elbow lifting down. And squeeze the shoulder blades together. In both shoulders, we want moving away from the ears. This can become a little bit of a challenge as we stretch those elbows, so be mindful. Really prioritize pulling those shoulders away from the ears, specifically on that left side, on that lifted upward arm. And then release the hands, straighten the arms. Last side, last time, taking the strap over to the left side, bringing the hand to the back of the pelvis. You press your palm into the back, reach the elbow to the wall behind you, pulling the shoulder to the floor. Then reach your right arm up and overhead, bend your elbow, the hand will come towards the base of the neck. As you grab onto the strap, pull the strap away from each other, or the hands will pull, although they might not slide on the strap. Then reach the elbows in different directions. And as you do this, be mindful of what's happening to that right shoulder. See if you can pull that right shoulder down the spine, even though that elbow is lifting up towards the ceiling. To squeeze the shoulder blades together, lift the sternum up, the very center of the chest. And soften any tension in the neck or the throat, letting go of any gripping in the eyes. And you'll release the hands, standing nice and tall. Take a breath here. And then you can place your strap off to the side. Now we're going to practice two more things while standing. We won't spend too much more time, but these next things that we're going to practice are things that I actually integrate when I'm feeling any major pain or tension. So if I do something that I've, tweaked my neck or tweaked my shoulder, the next two things that we're going to practice are pretty much my immediate go-tos. This first one is called Garudasana, or eagle pose. I'm going to demonstrate really quickly and then we'll practice together. So I'm going to come down to a little bit of a kneeling position so that you can see a little bit better. And then I can also move to the side. I'll do this a couple of times. So I'm going to start facing you. What I'm going to do is bring my arms up and forward. So my elbows are in line with my shoulders. Fingertips are pointing up towards the ceiling. I'm going to bring my right elbow in and I'm going to place my left elbow on the top of it. So again, I'm just crossing my elbows here. Now I really want to try and bring the backs of my hands together, maybe even wrap my right palm around my left palm. And so as I turn to the side, you can see this side view of what's going on here. Often the hand might want to come towards the head and the elbows want to drop down. Instead, I want to pull my hands away from my face and lift the elbows up towards the ceiling, Garudasana. And then I can unweave and come back to center and practice the other side. So I'm bringing my left elbow in, right arm crosses on top. I'm either trying to press my palms together or backs of my hands together, or some of you guys will even be able to complete that wrap. And I'm lifting the elbows up, pulling the hands away from my body, taking a few breaths here. When we practice, we even take the chin forward towards the chest for a few breaths. And then we'll come back up, unweave, and we'll relax. All right, so that's Garudasana. We'll go ahead and practice together. So we're still in that standing posture with the feet about hip width apart and toes turned in slightly. Bring your arms forward in line with the shoulders, elbows bend up towards the ceiling. And we're gonna bring our right elbow in, left elbow goes on top. Now, some of you guys might be here, and that's okay. Just try to stretch and bring the palms or backs of the hands towards each other. Remember, we want those palms lifting away from the face and the elbows lifting away from the floor. Now, if you can complete that grasp and really wrap that right arm around that left palm, it's almost like the left arm is a nice stable stake, and we're just wrapping the other hand around it here. Elbows lift, palms come away from the face, taking a nice deep inhale and exhale, and then bringing the chin forward towards the chest. We still want to keep that form in the arms, even though the head is bowing down. And you'll slowly lift your chin, unravel the arms, and just let your hands hang for a moment. Notice where the most sensation came up in your body. And we'll do the other side, bringing the hands up. Elbows are in line with the shoulders, fingertips pointing towards the ceiling. Bring your left arm in, right arm crosses on top. You're either gonna stretch the backs of the palms towards each other or complete that wrap of the left hand around the right. And lifting the elbows up, pulling the palms away from your face. On your next exhale, bring your chin down to the chest. You take a nice deep inhale and exhale. Try to breathe into the upper back. Just really allowing that space to stretch. And then you can lift your head, unweave the arms, and bring the hands down along the sides. You take a few breaths here. Don't worry too much about what the shoulders are doing. Focus more on lifting the center of the sternum and the crown of the head, just allowing the shoulders and the arms to drape to the floor. We're going to do each side just one more time. And so we'll bring our arms up in line with the elbows, fingertips pointing towards the ceiling, right arm in, left arm crosses. Can either complete the twist or press the backs of the hands towards each other. Pull the wrists away from you as you lift your elbows up, and then bring the chin down to the chest. And slowly lifting the head, unraveling the arms, can bring the hands down along to the sides. Last side, last time. Arms up in line with the shoulders, elbows bend, left arm in, right arm on top. Can complete the twist or press the backs of the palms towards each other. Lift your wrists away from the face, elbows up, and then bring the chin down to the chest. Nice deep, steady inhale, deep, steady exhale. And then you'll lift your head, unravel the arms, and let the hands rest. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. I'm going to adjust the camera here so that you can see what we're going to practice next a little bit better. So we are going to use some wall space. You can improvise by using a chair or even a ledge. One of these things that we're going to practice, you're going to have the hand about shoulder height. So you will need something that's at least that tall. For our first practice, though, it really just needs to be about hip height. And so I'm going to turn around so you guys can see what's happening with my arms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach the hand back behind me. It's about hip height. Palm is facing the wall and my thumb is facing up towards the ceiling here. I'm going to take a few breaths here. Now, eventually you might feel comfortable actually stepping in a little bit closer to the wall here. The main thing we want to be aware of is that our chest isn't completely turning towards the wall. Instead, I'm trying to keep the shoulders in a neutral position compared to the hips. So I'm still in my mountain pose or my Tadasana pose while I'm practicing this. And then to release, you can shift away from the wall and bring the hand back down. I'm going to demonstrate this side now so you can see a different angle. When we move to the other side, standing with the feet about hip width apart, bringing the hand back behind me, thumb points up towards the ceiling. It's about hip height. Then as you feel it's comfortable, you might even step a little bit closer to the wall. The main thing is we're looking to have the shoulders in that neutral position still, as opposed to that shoulder being completely pulled back and the opposite one pulling forward. And then to come out, we'll release the hand from the wall and stand in Tadasana. Alrighty? If there's no questions, we'll go ahead and practice. So let's start with the right arm. You'll stand a couple of inches away from the wall. The feet are hip width apart. You're going to take the right hand behind you, and with the palm on the wall, you'll have your thumb pointing up towards the ceiling. The palm is hip height, and then there's also a good foot of space between the hand and the hip. So we're not wanting it to be super close. Instead, we're reaching the hand back behind us. Now that left arm that's hanging off to the side, bring a little bit of attention to it. So as you lift the sternum up, reach the left fingertips down towards the floor. Just take a nice, smooth, deep, steady inhale, deep, steady exhale. Feel how that whole right shoulder is being pulled onto the back of the body. Now, if you feel comfortable doing so, you can even scoot yourself a little bit closer to the wall. Still have those feet hip width apart. It's not necessary to stand closer to the wall. You might find that it becomes a little bit more of a challenge for the shoulder mobility to step closer to the wall. So have some discerning and know that you might come a little closer with time and practice. Then to come out, you can slide your hand down next to your hip, turning the palm towards your body and just standing up nice and tall. Now we'll switch sides. So I'm going to start now with the left side of the body towards the wall, a couple of inches of space, and the feet are hip width apart. I'm going to bring my left hand behind me, about hip height, and my palm is against the wall, thumb is pointing up towards the ceiling. Trying to press my palm into the wall and actually roll the top of my shoulder back behind me. Now, even though that right arm isn't really doing anything, see if you can actually stretch it along the right side of your body, reaching the fingertips towards the floor. We should feel strong in our body and our spine. As you take a nice deep exhale, bring your weight into your heels and lift your sternum up towards the ceiling. Lift the crown of your head up towards the ceiling. If you feel it's appropriate, you can go ahead and step a little bit closer to the wall. Every inhale and every exhale, notice what's happening to the shoulders, specifically the shoulder blades and the collarbones. So when I say shoulder, it's kind of a dynamic area that we're wanting to bring attention to. There's this nice stretch in the collarbone, and that shoulder blade is pulling in towards the spine as well as being pulled down to the floor. And then to come out, you can bring your hand back alongside the hips. Taking a nice, smooth, steady inhale and exhale. Now, this next practice is just a little bit different. I'm going to demonstrate so that you can kind of see what we're up to. I'm going to extend my hand out so that it's in line with my shoulder. So really my wrist is in line with my shoulder. That whole upper arm bone should be parallel to the floor. I have my pointer finger or my index finger pointing straight up and the fingers spread nice and wide. My other hand is just going to reach along my side here. Now we want to notice what's happening in that shoulder. Often what happens as we roll our shoulder back, it's still quite lifted, right? And you can see this bulge at the top of my shoulder here. Instead, what we want is that that shoulder blade actually moves down the spine. What this is going to feel like is it's gonna feel like a bottom tip of your shoulder blade is actually tucking in as the chest lifts up. So rather than kind of lifting the chest with the shoulder, we're trying to pull that shoulder blade down and use that bottom tip of the shoulder blade to lift the chest up. So if you were to watch me, just notice the difference between this position. This is position A, right? Notice this hump of the shoulder, a little bit more space here. Now watch position B. Shoulder blade moves down and in. There's a little bit more contraction happening here in the lat, but I also get some really nice length here in the top of my shoulder. Now this can be a little bit trickier, and we'll bring the hand down. This pose can be a little bit trickier because it really takes some attentiveness and honesty in what's happening in the shoulder. Again, we really want to be feeling those bottom tips of the shoulder blades pulling in to lift up. So that's how you're going to know that you've got this. If you feel it more on the tops of the shoulders, then it probably is going to take a little bit more movement to get that shoulder back and down. All right, let's go ahead and just give it a try and see where we're at. We're going to start with our right hand against the wall. Wrist comes to the wall about shoulder height. Feet are still hip width apart here. Index finger is pointing up towards the ceiling as you spread the fingers wide. Now give a little bend to your elbow and try and lift your inner arm up towards the ceiling. Top of the shoulder rolls back and down. Now, some of you guys, you could probably even place your hand on that shoulder and feel that we're in position A at this point in time, all right? Now I want you to try and squeeze the shoulder blades together. Remember when we pulled our shoulders back to the wall behind us in the beginning of class? Squeeze the shoulder blades together, pull the shoulders back, and now feel how that shoulder actually drops down. You should feel a little bit more attentiveness here at that base of the shoulder blade, really underneath the armpit, as opposed to the top of the shoulder. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. So the actions here are lifting that inner arm, turning this whole humerus bone, almost lifting the front of the armpit. That's action 1. Action 2, squeeze the shoulder blades by pulling the shoulders back to the wall behind you. And try and maintain that position as you slowly bring your hand down along the side. Now we'll do the other side. So this one, again, it can take time. So if you're not feeling this right away, it might take a couple of times of practicing it to really get that movement. As you bring your left wrist to the wall, have it in line with the shoulder, spread your fingers wide, index finger points up towards the ceiling. You're gonna give a little bend to your left elbow, try and lift the front of your armpit up. Roll your whole upper arm bone up and back to the wall behind you. That's action 1. Now action 2, squeeze the shoulder blades. Try and lift the shoulders back to the wall behind you and draw that inner edge of the left shoulder blade down the spine. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale, and try to maintain. It's not like we do it and then we accomplish it and we hold it. There is a constant transition and movement and effort to practice this. There's a constant turning of the inner arm up, rolling of the shoulder back, squeezing of the shoulder blades together as you draw the shoulders away from the ears. And try and maintain that position as you reach the hand down along the sideways. Now try to do on both sides. Shoulder blades squeeze as your fingertips reach. Those shoulder blades are also pulling down towards the floor. Take a nice deep exhale and tuck your tailbone towards your heels. As you take in a few deep breaths, lift through the very crown of your head and see if you can maintain that general structure without that intense tightness. So allow your breath to come in. Try and hold that structure of the skeleton as you also allow the breath to soften the muscles. And then you can relax and release. So it can be pretty in depth. As I've mentioned, that shoulder joint has a lot of layers to it. can be pretty complicated to work with. So I hope that the instructions were clear enough for you to continue practicing this. And again, you'll be able to watch this video over again, and you can particularly watch that section if it's something that you felt was beneficial for you. So we're going to go ahead and end class today in one of those poses that we started with. We started with a rolled blanket, or one of the poses we started with was a rolled blanket in our upper back, and then we had some more support underneath our head. We're going to move back into that position just for a nice restful shavasana or corpse pose before we close out for the rest of the day. So you can grab what you used before. We want the stack of props that's underneath our head to be the same height or maybe even a little bit taller than the rolled blanket that we have in our upper back. If you have a blanket in shelf fold, we'll unfold it once and then roll the long edge. Now I'm just going to guide coming into this and some important pieces, and I'm really going to try and avoid talking too much since we're wanting to just take this time to absorb and relax as we transition into the rest of our day. Once your props are set up, we'll come down to our elbows on that rolled blanket. We spread the elbows wide. You can bring your head to the support. Then gently press into your feet. Roll the shoulders down towards the floor as the chest lifts up. You can bring that support that's underneath your head and neck tight to the tops of the shoulders. Feel free to hold under the base of the skull or give a little pull on the occiput to lengthen the back of the neck. If you're comfortable doing so, you can go ahead and straighten the legs. Taking a nice deep inhale and exhale. Feel your body settling, weighing heavy into the floor. You're welcome to stay here for Shavasana, or you can roll to your side and remove that rolled blanket that's in your upper back. And then you'll roll back on to your back. So the spine is just flat on the floor with plenty of support underneath the head. You can decide what would be best for you and your body today. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, let go of any tension that might have risen in the face, eyes, lips, or jaw. Observe your body as an entire unit, bringing your attention towards the skin. And slowly place your hands on your abdomen. Appreciate your body for all that it's done and all that it will do. Appreciate your mind for taking the time to practice and harmonize with your body. You can take your time coming up. Start by slowly bending the knees, bringing the feet flat to the floor. You can bring your right hand underneath your head as you roll to your side, supporting your head with your hand for a few breaths. And whenever you're ready, press yourself up to a comfortable seated posture. I appreciate you for taking the time to practice yoga with me today. Really for taking the time to get to know and care for your body. Namaste. Well, I hope that there's something that you can take away into your daily practice or daily care for your neck and your shoulders. If there's any questions that you have, please feel free to reach out to me or ask me. Otherwise, I'm so grateful that you made it, and I really hope to see you at my next webinar.